Hi, I'm Tim Zacharias with Cougar USA and your host of Building Value. We are at the Houston Zoo today at the Texas Wetlands Exhibit, and I am joined by Colley Hodges, Sustainability Manager at the Houston Zoo. Colley, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. Great to have you out to the Houston Zoo. Nice background and ambiance here in front of our award-winning Texas Wetlands Exhibit, so welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And, I'm really excited about this episode. We're going to be talking about sustainability in the built environment and the actual environment. On Building Value, we go behind the scenes of building operations to showcase the people and products that make buildings work and the value they bring to the community. Can you tell me about where you grew up?
Yeah, so native Houstonian, grew up, born and raised in Houston, went to school here, have plenty of fond memories of visiting the zoo as a kid. Went to school here, went to University of Houston, at first studied actually journalism and worked as a journalist for a little while for a local newspaper in South Houston.
Okay.
And then actually, I think we all just kind of naturally gravitate towards what we're kind of good at, and we get interested in what we're good at. But ended up studying English and creative writing. So actually graduated with a dual degree in literature and creative writing before going back to school for architecture. But
nice.
Yeah, local Houstonian, grew up in Houston. I feel like Houston is still an underrated city.
Absolutely is.
Can't beat the food. Can't have the most diverse large city right in the U.S., which is, I think, partly responsible for why the food is so awesome.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those best kept secrets, and I'm okay with it being a secret. It's
right.
Kind of flies under the radar a little bit, but definitely a lot of good things going on here in Houston that most people don't know about.
Yep, I hear you. I'm with you.
So zoo being one of them, obviously. So it's great to be here and be able to do this podcast here at the Houston Zoo.
Yeah, welcome.
Appreciate that. So can you talk a little bit about what you did after, graduating with your architecture degree?
Yeah. So like I said, went back to school for architecture after I'd worked for a little while, actually teaching writing and directing a writing support program. And going back to school for architecture was like my way of, instead of like blowing my life savings on backpacking in Europe or Argentina or something, it was, and coming back the same person, I was like, let me try that architecture thing out. So after and that was super humbling, by the way. I would say architecture school is really hard. A lot of people say it's behind law school and med school as far as time commitment. That's totally true. But after that, when I graduated, I started at Kirksey Architecture, which is one of the larger local architecture firms. There's offices across Texas now. And they were known for sustainable design. So I immediately started with their in-house sustainability team, and worked there for about 9 years, ended up leading their sustainability efforts before I joined the zoo. So that was amazing experience, great experience as far as the world of architecture, but also connecting to the local environmental community and getting involved with local environmental nonprofits. So that's kind of where I ended up. I've had that winding path that you often hear about to kind of get to where I am. So it was going through writing and kind of storytelling, and then trying to connect that to architecture and the way that the built environment tells stories about culture and history and people and the science of building, the art of building, and got really plugged into the green building movement at that point, and that led me here.
Awesome. And so how long have you been here at the Houston Zoo?
So it's only been, I think it's 10 months.
Okay.
Yeah. So still, relatively new to the zoo world, and some people who are in positions like not every zoo has a sustainability focused staff member, but some people who are in this role come from more the traditional conservation and kind of zoo world. Other ones come from more environmental policy, kind of ESG work.
Right.
But for me, it was coming and bringing my knowledge as an architect specializing in green building to kind of plug into it. So only 10 months, still kind of learning a lot, but it's been great so far. I tell you, like, best lunchtime walks of my career for sure.
Oh, sure.
And there's something
interesting coworkers.
Yeah.
There might
exactly.
be a few joining us here while we're recording in the background.
Absolutely. There's something really charming about the zoo, and everyone has positive memories who grew up in Houston of the zoo, but also the people here. I mean, everyone really kind of embraces that like moral and kind of ethical charge to be stewards of the environment and animals. And it makes sense that people who come to work for the zoo would kind of run through that filter.
Oh, yeah.
And people who work with animals tend to be really cool, nice people. So.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So can you give us just a little bit of background about the zoo and kind of your role as that sustainability manager?
Yep, for sure. So this year we're celebrating our 100-year anniversary. So the zoo started in the 1920s. Actually started with one animal, a bison named Earl, that was brought to Herman Park.
Earl the bison.
Earl the bison, yep.
All right.
And the zoo grew and kind of, I think, followed the kind of ups and downs of Houston. So periods of more rapid growth, periods of slower growth. And then the zoo privatized in the early 2002, and is now run by a nonprofit with the support of the city of Houston.
Sure.
And I think since then, the majority of the zoo really has been kind of rebuilt and renovated since then. So folks who haven't been to the zoo for a while, they're going to see a lot of new stuff.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably what is, tying into your architecture background, been a good fit for you, is that there is a lot of construction going on here, a lot of changes, and it's not, that as much that conservation side that you're maybe plugged into, but that built environment, like you said, to be able to give some direction there.
Yeah. We're doing a lot of building, and right now we're actually about to enter construction for two of our two projects that'll be our first LEED buildings. So I'm sure your listeners know, but LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, most used green building rating system in the world. So that'll be a first for us to have two LEED buildings on campus. There's been some stuff that I've been able to plug into right away as far as new construction, as well as starting to understand how our facility is working, and all kinds of interesting lessons. 100-year-old infrastructure, but still with a lot that's been renovated, and it's fascinating. And I should add too, as far as the history of the zoo, I mean, at first, so I think a lot of people still have some associations with the zoo of kind of the old model of zoos. Originally, it was more of like a menagerie of just animals in captivity, and even certain kind of species are lumped together, the same species. So all the reptiles here, all the monkeys here, and the modern zoos are really like conservation organizations.
Right.
They're still places of recreation, but and still just a good day outdoors with the family. But really they're conservation organizations now, and you'll see a lot of the more recent exhibits are shifting towards kind of trying to depict a full ecology, so symbiotic relationships and animals that really exist together in the wild, rather than a more taxonomical, here's all the reptiles, here's all the monkeys. Exactly. The more recent exhibits, including the one behind us, are better examples of that. But that was something that I really didn't fully appreciate till I came to the zoo, was how committed everybody is to conservation, and how really the whole mission of the zoo. I mean, I kind of knew it intellectually, but to really see it in action, the modern zoo, they are about conservation. And the education and the recreation are kind of supporting that, I guess.
Right, and it's kind of interesting to hear you say that, because we've seen it. And I was looking back at. We've had a history of working with the zoo and being able to provide equipment for different projects, and it's always kind of interesting to see them as job names, like on the plan sets and stuff. So we've done stuff like in the elephant exhibit, the vet hospital, but some of the newer ones, like you're talking about, like the Galapagos and Texas Wetlands, things like that, being more geared towards those environments, not necessarily towards a specific animal. Yeah,
and this is really, I mean, to me, this is maybe the best example of it. Texas Wetlands. This is an award-winning exhibit, won national exhibit awards, and it's transplanting this really iconic ecosystem for the Gulf Coast right into the heart of Houston. Yep. So it has, instead of exotic species, local species like whooping cranes, bald eagles,
some
alligators
flying around, some turtles,
Yep. And the other cool thing is that it's actually a functioning wetland. Yep. So it really performs like the ecosystem that again it's trying to emulate, that it's been constructed. So it swells when it rains, heavy rain, and I think it swells by like 60,000 gallons.
Oh, wow.
More than 10% of its capacity. And as you see, it supports a ton of wildlife, not just the ones that are part of the exhibit, but something like 150 to 200 species that are supported here.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool too, as far as the overall story of the zoo too. This used to be kind of a muddy, duck pond in the 80s that was using a lot of water and not near as diverse of a habitat. Sure. And the Cypress Circle Cafe right next to us too was kind of a less impressive food service venue. And now it's this amazing reused 1950s, like mid 20th century structure, and a revenue anchor for the zoo, and have turned kind of the heart of the zoo into this amazing award-winning exhibit, and our highest revenue source as far as restaurants.
Yeah, it's very cool. And you kind of touched on that the zoo is in the heart of Houston, and I think that's really, really interesting and somewhat unique for zoos, right? To be kind of almost landlocked, right in this, kind of right next to the Hermit Park, basically in Hermit Park, next to the Texas Medical Center. So what kind of challenges does that present for the zoo to be able to expand or make changes to add new exhibits?
Yeah, right. I mean, you kind of nailed it. Essentially being landlocked, and that's part of the interesting character of the zoo. We can see in the medical center in the background of these beautiful naturalistic exhibits. But yeah, there are certain space constraints that end up being a challenge, I think, for master planning. And to connect it to the sustainability side, there's even kind of operational implications. Some zoos, like for example, zoos generate that have the type of animals we do. They generate a great internal resource in a way, which is elephant manure. Some zoos actually sell that on site. It apparently makes the greatest fertilizer you could imagine. Or something like composting food scraps. Some other zoos have more real estate where they're able to have places where they store compost. They can have piles. They can have ways that they can process some of that stuff on site. For us, we have to look at more sending that waste to be composted at other kind of local composters rather than doing it on site. So it's the kind of thing that if we just had a different, more rural setup, there might be other opportunities we could explore. So just one way that kind of our challenges being landlocked, it kind of bleed into the sustainability world. But
sure.
Again, I don't think anyone would change it. It's part of our character, and it's part of the kind of romance of this particular zoo. And it also, there's other benefits. The fact that you can get here easily using public transportation, that's a unique advantage, and that also has a connection to the sustainability side. That's less personal automobile emissions for our staff and our guests.
Very cool. So we've touched on it a couple of times, but let's talk a little bit about sustainability in general. So,
sure.
I'd just like to get your kind of take on what you feel like sustainability means, and then how you're applying that to the zoo.
Yeah, great question. There's a lot of kind of common definitions of sustainability that are out there. Some really, really good ones that are just describing the idea of that we need to use resources to live comfortably now, but we can do so in a way that's responsible and not compromising future generations' ability to meet their needs. In the architecture world that I come from, honestly, sustainability is really, I hate to say it, but about doing less harm. It's really, we're kind of still in the damage mitigation kind of mode. Occasionally there are projects that reach that kind of break even of net zero, or that even get into the realm of restorative, a positive impact and leaving a site better than you found it. But generally, it's trying to figure out how we can operate buildings and cities in ways that are minimizing damage and shifting towards that positive impact. But for the zoo, I tell everybody here, there's almost a different definition of sustainability, which is sustainability is saving animals in the wild. The more we shrink our environmental footprint as an organization, the more we are saving animals in the wild. The less we are contributing to things like climate change, the less we're consuming resources like water, the less waste we're producing, the more we are saving animals in the wild. So that's where sustainability really plugs right into the zoo's mission.
Very cool.
And it's, saving animals in the wild is an easily stated goal, and it's
Right.
as simple as it is to say. There's a lot of complex ways to get there, and what I've tried to bring to this role with my background is just thinking about the way that we operate our facilities, our buildings. How can we shrink that environmental footprint?
Sure. Yeah, and I think this exhibit right here, you kind of touched on the three kind of main principles that you hear talked about a lot, which are the economy, society, and the environment, right?
Yeah,
Those being
triple bottom line.
those three kind of win-win-win situations, right? So also called, you hear that maybe termed as planet, people, and profits, right?
Yep.
The 3 Ps. So, you talk about here, you have an area that you kind of reclaimed, reused the facility, and now is a great exhibit and also producing money for the zoo. So it seems like a great example of kind of touching on all three of those principles.
You're totally right, and I should say too about the sustainability movement in general, and this is again kind of more colored by my perspective with green building, is it's become multi-nodal, if that makes sense, or specialized in certain ways, and it's been interesting to kind of watch the trends of the sustainability movement. Where when I first kind of got plugged into this world, or shortly after that, really transparency became a big push when it came to materials and toxic chemicals that we tend to put in buildings, embodied carbon. So that transparency movement kind of started to shift more towards really a focus on embodied carbon and carbon.
Yep.
And then more recently, it's that social side that's really kind of emerged, and the idea of environmental justice, environmental equity is kind of one of the more kind of recent focuses of the sustainability movement. And I know you see that in the ESG world too, where that social side is something everyone's really trying to explore and figure out right now.
It seems to be the least defined, right, of ESG. Still, I think people are trying to figure out how to do that as either a company or a nonprofit. But for Cougar and for the work that we've done, I think where we align best with kind of those three, the people, profit, and planet, is what we try to do as these high performance solutions. So, a combination of the sustainable design, so very energy and water efficient, long usable life, with good performance, right? So we are either providing good water pressure, or it's safe, comfortable, reliable operation at the lowest life cycle cost. And so trying to touch on all three of those while providing the best solutions for our customers has really kind of been our best way to be sustainable and to provide sustainable solutions for our customers, which luckily for us includes the zoo. And so, it's a great opportunity to be here and to be talking with you about it. But so, it's just been great for us to be able to work on projects out here at the zoo as the zoo kind of evolves, like you said. And so, drive around town and point out buildings and other things to my family. And my sons are still excited at this point. My wife's a little tired of hearing about it. We got a booster pump in that building. We got heaters in that building. But, to point at the zoo and say, oh, well, we have equipment at the elephant exhibit or the gorillas or, things like that. It's just kind of a whole new layer to what we do that's, gives you that pride and that you're taking a little bit of piece in what's going on in your city. So,
yeah, well, I mean, been great partners. I mean, the thing is, the stakes are real high here. I mean, it's animal welfare as well as, the usual kind of challenges that you would have just towards performance. I think you hitting on performance, I think is so key. And you could really almost recast back to the sustainability kind of discussion. You could almost recast the whole sustainability movement as about performance. I mean, it's about good, efficient design and design that makes sense.
Sure.
Hitting that triple bottom line. So I think it's a really good point.
Very cool. So if we kind of look forward a little bit with the zoo, what I know the Galapagos is a really big project right now, and I'm pretty excited about that one. We, lucky to be able to provide a little bit of equipment on that one as well. But what is special about the Galapagos? What's different about it for the Houston Zoo?
Yeah, super excited about Galapagos. So opening next year. The stuff that's unique and different about it, and this is, I think, the first Galapagos-themed exhibit for any zoo, and it's this, fascinating ecosystem. You'll have like giant kind of lava rocks and cactuses right next to the ocean, and penguins and sea lions, and so that's actually another thing that everyone's excited about is having penguins at the zoo.
Not what you would expect to see in Texas, but
yeah, right,
all right.
right. But it's one of our larger projects, and one of the coolest things is that it has an embedded take action message. So you'll see it's kind of a procession, a journey through the exhibit, and at the end there is a kind of an area that focuses on single-use plastics and their impacts on the ocean and wildlife. So it has this embedded take action, message for our guests. It's really gonna be great. It's gonna be a really exciting exhibit. And when it opens, it'll be one of a kind and a real feather in our cap, and a really complex project that has had a lot of great partners to kind of get us there. So we can't wait for it to open. You'll have to come back by after
yes,
it's opened
definitely love to. So can you talk a little bit about it on the sustainability side, either with that exhibit specifically or maybe other projects that you have going on at the zoo?
Yeah, definitely. I came in a little late on the Galapagos project, and a lot of the sustainability solutions had already kind of been embedded in that. So my involvement has been a little bit during construction, tracking construction waste, and some kind of more basic stuff there, and assisting with that take action message related to single-use plastics. But as far as other projects at the zoo connected to sustainability, I already mentioned our 2 lead buildings that are in design. One of them is really, they're both going to be special. One of them is going to be really unique because it'll be our first mass timber building.
Oh, very cool.
It's a cafe and event space, Jack's Cafe, that'll be at the front of the zoo. Lake Flato is the architect on that project, and it's been great working with them. It's going to be a really neat building, and I think a showcase building for the zoo as far as sustainability. And I don't know how much you want to get into it, but the mass timber structural system is one that on average performs really well when it comes to a lot of environmental impact areas, especially carbon emissions.
I'm curious about that because you're hearing that term, that mass timber, and it being kind of touted as being sustainable, but it almost seems to kind of go counter to what you would think. So what is it about the mass timber that makes it a sustainable design?
Yeah, you're totally right. Where there's something counterintuitive about it, and people would say, wait, so you cut down trees to build the building? How can that be sustainable? Well, the biggest thing is that over the life of wood, obviously it is sequestering carbon, so it's absorbing carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in itself and in the soil. So when you have a mass timber building, it's compared to the alternatives of steel and concrete, it's going to have less carbon over its lifespan. It has absorbed enough carbon, sequestered enough carbon to offset the carbon emitted during the harvesting, manufacturing, transportation to the site, construction process. So that's kind of the main the main argument for it. And wood has other benefits. I'm sure you're familiar with the term biophilia. It's this natural kind of connection that human beings have to nature. And wood buildings that can kind of reinforce that connection to nature through natural materials, or even views to the outside, or even green walls and plants inside. They tend to have a lot of benefits for occupants, like lower blood pressure.
Interesting.
From people who work in kind of biophilic buildings. So there's other benefits, I think, to using wood, and it can also kind of ground a project in a region. If you use local woods,
sure,
and you're kind of connecting to the local environment, and especially in our part of the country, wood was the vernacular building material that was often used. We built buildings out of wood since the time we were building buildings around here. But yeah, that's kind of the angle on mass timber. But also to connect to, I should mention some other sustainability projects besides just the buildings. Being the architect, I kind of gravitate towards the stuff that we're building.
Sure.
But we just recently announced a huge initiative, which was in partnership with our culinary and retail partner, SSA Group. We have phased out single-use plastic packaging in all of our stores.
Nice.
And this is a really big deal. We're the first zoo in the United States to have done this. And it's really like the latest step on a longer process for us. So we originally, as an effort to try to phase out single-use plastics, looked at bottles, looked at bags, straws. So single-use plastic packaging in our stores is kind of the latest effort along
Nice.
along that. And again, a lot of credit due to SSA for the work that they did there. We walked through the whole zoo with them and did an audit and really looked at everything that had single-use plastic in it. And they have reached out to their manufacturers and suppliers to phase those out.
Nice.
And that's like the other really cool part of it is that there are other zoos that are going to benefit from this because SSA also
services multiple zoos.
Yeah,
Sure.
they do. So we've kind of done the work here, but there's other zoos that are going to be most of the way there. We've set up a model for them to also phase out single-use plastics, and even without explicitly setting that as a goal, they're still going to have a lot fewer products that have single-use plastics.
Right.
And I should say, if it's not obvious, the whole argument behind this is that single-use plastics end up often in bodies of water, compromise those ecosystems, and harm wildlife. So that's the intent behind us doing it.
Sure, and obviously to raise awareness around the issue, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Very cool.
It'll be literally right across from that Galapagos exhibit that has that take action theme. So.
Yeah. So you hit on the Jack Squirrel and some of the other sustainability projects going on, but I think you mentioned another building as well under construction.
Yep. We have an office and staff parking garage that we're building. Much everyone knows about the parking challenges with the zoo. So currently staff are largely competing with guests for parking. So this is going to benefit our parking situation and kind of hit the a little bit of a release valve there. But it's also going to be a staff office building. Again, targeting probably LEED Gold, probably a low LEED
Nice.
Gold certification. And it's everyone's really excited about that because. Some of our offices are a little older too. Again, we're an old zoo.
Yeah, and I imagine maybe sprawled out a little bit as things have evolved. So
Yeah, definitely. So that'll be great. That's another really exciting one. That and Jack's Cafe. Then we also have a Birds of the World project that's in early design. That's also kind of looking at some impressive sustainability certifications or efforts. Still kind of early on in that process, but yeah, a lot going on.
very cool. Very cool. So as you look forward with the zoo and just kind of sustainability in general, what do you feel like, or where do you feel like kind of the zoo is headed, and what is going to be your role in that?
Yeah. So right now we're actually revising or kind of redoing our strategic plan. And I think one of the real opportunities there is to kind of openly acknowledge climate change as a threat to wildlife and to really craft sustainability goals around addressing climate, right? Tackling climate change head on. Again, don't want to jump the gun. We're still kind of in this process of developing our new strategic plan. But as you would expect, the board and leadership, I think, has been supportive of this idea of trying to tackle climate change head on. And I'm relatively new to the zoo world, but it from what I've seen, there's not that many zoos that have kind of really articulated climate change as a threat to wildlife, and then really oriented a sustainability plan around that. So I think that's a tremendous opportunity. Everything from water to waste ultimately can kind of connect to carbon emissions, but particularly climate change and its impacts on habitat and that overall warming of the planet. And, I think gearing a sustainability plan around emissions makes a lot of sense.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, obviously that supports that kind of conservation effort and kind of mission that you mentioned for the zoo in general. So
yeah, and the second part of your question, like my role in that. I mean, I'm essentially a facilitator of collaboration. So working with a bunch of teams that know way more than I do about the way the zoo runs. So it's from collaboration with design and engineering for the new building projects that we've talked about, to our water quality team, to our horticulture team, to our grounds and housekeeping team, and to our conservation education team. So that I think being someone who can kind of facilitate collaboration, I think is my role there. Yeah, I mean, as human beings, our superpower is collaboration, and we are equipped with the most powerful tool in history, like the human brain, and we've got the latest version. Like our software, is up to date. But the way that but I mean, honestly, like we're more like neurons. Like a single neuron is not all that impressive, but collectively they can do amazing things. So
Sure.
I think collaboration as our superpower as a species is really how we can get ourselves out of some of the messes that we've made, and really kind of what it's all about. And my role is mainly facilitating collaboration.
Very cool. And I think it's really interesting that you get to work on both the built environment and the actual environment here, having that kind of tie, like you said, to sustainability with conservation of animals and things like that. So it's a very interesting perspective on sustainability here. And I think it's a pretty cool example of how you can positively impact both the built environment and the environment in general through the sustainable designs.
Yeah, yep, you're totally right. It's been a lot to learn. The zoo world is really complex, and for me, that pivot from being a service provider as an architect, on the design side, and trying to pivot that to really being on the owner and client side and operations side has been a really interesting adventure. And again, a lot to learn. And it would have been cool, honestly, to do that for a major company, whatever, Walmart or Hewlett Packard or something. Like that would have been super interesting and fun. But the center of the bullseye was to do it for an organization that really fully aligned with with my values and had interesting challenges. Very 100-year-old zoo and unique waste streams, aging infrastructure. There's all kinds of interesting challenges on the operations side that connect to sustainability. So
Sure.
It's been fun.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, any kind of additional thoughts or words of advice for anybody that's maybe looking to get into this industry, maybe not necessarily the zoo specifically, but sustainability world in general?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question. Like I kind of mentioned earlier, there's folks who come from all different backgrounds that end up in a position like mine, focusing on sustainability for a nonprofit. I think generally when it comes to sustainability and architecture, there's a lot of chances to get involved on a volunteer basis, and it goes beyond architecture too. I mean, I think it's really kind of anyone who wants to be in the sustainability world, I would say volunteer, get involved in one of the many or some of the many local environmental nonprofits in the Houston area. Get involved with the American Institute of Architects and some of the sustainability programs that they have, the Committee on the Environment, the Gulf Coast Green Conference. These are great ways just to connect other people in the
Green
industry.
Building Conference or Council.
Yep, U.S. Green Building Council, absolutely, and even get plugged into organizations like the Citizens Environmental Coalition, which kind of serves as this kind of conduit for all the local environmental nonprofits. So it's a good way to get a lot of exposure. Yeah, that happens.
We gotta fly by.
You gotta get used to it. Yeah,
that was like Maverick over there.
There
just
you go.
Buzzing the tower.
When you work here, I think you get the 1,000-yard stare. You don't even blink when the birds dive bomb you. But no, they're used to navigating around people.
Well, I think that's kind of a perfect way to segue into the end of this episode. But it's been very interesting to be here at the zoo and involved here with the wildlife and everything else that's going on. It's definitely a very busy place, and I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to talk about it and share stories about the zoo and sustainability in general. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, man, it's been a pleasure to have you. And like I said, we got to have you back once Galapagos opens up. We could rope in some of our water quality folks and do a deeper dive into your world, into the water side of that very complex exhibit.
Very cool. Well, thanks again.
Yeah.
If you haven't been out to the Houston Zoo in a while, I definitely encourage you to come check it out. A lot of good stuff going on, a lot of good things to check out. And, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Building Value.